In 1943, every aerial gunner in the U.S. Army Air Force was taught the same golden rule. Tracers are your friends. They were told that those bright, glowing bullets were the only way to see where you were shooting. Every fifth round in the ammo belt was a tracer, a streak of phosphorus that lit up the sky, guiding your aim toward the enemy fighter. It sounded perfect. It sounded safe. But there was one problem that the manuals didn't mention. If you can see where your bullets are going, the enemy can see exactly where they are coming from. For thousands of young gunners, those tracers were not a targeting aid. They were a death sentence. They were neon signs pointing straight to their heads, screaming, "Here I am. Kill me first." But one man saw through the lie. A man who didn't care about regulations, rank, or standard procedures. He decided to do something that his commanders called suicidal and his fellow crewmen called insane. He emptied his guns. He stripped every single tracer round from his belts. He chose to fight in the dark. His name was Technical Sergeant Arthur Benko, and with his stupid ammo trick, he didn't just survive. He became the deadliest aerial gunner the Pacific War had ever seen. This is the story of the man who invented invisible death. To understand why Benko's actions were so radical, we first have to understand the slaughterhouse that was the sky over China in 1943. The 14th Air Force, operating out of dusty, remote airfields in places like Kunming and Guilin, was fighting a lonely war. They were at the end of the world's longest supply line. Every bullet, every drop of fuel, and every spare part had to be flown in over the Himalayas, the deadly route known as the Hump. The B-24 Liberator was their heavy hitter. A four-engine beast designed to carry tons of bombs deep into Japanese-occupied territory. But to the Japanese Zero pilots, the B-24 was something else. It was a lumbering target. It was big, it was slow, and compared to the B-17 Flying Fortress, it was fragile. Japanese tactics were brutal and effective. They wouldn't just attack randomly. They would look for the tracers. When a B-24 gunner opened fire, he painted a line in the sky. A Japanese pilot simply had to follow that line back to its source. It was geometry. If you follow the stream of light, you will find the turret. And if you destroy the turret, the bomber is defenseless. The loss rates were terrifying. Gunners had a life expectancy measured in minutes once the firing started. They were young kids, barely 20 years old, spraying ammunition into the void, hoping that the glowing lines would scare the fighters away. But Arthur Benko wasn't a kid, and he certainly wasn't hoping for anything. Benko was 32 years old, an old man by Air Force standards. While most of the boys in his squadron had learned to shoot in a 6-week crash course during basic training, Benko had been pulling triggers since he was big enough to hold a rifle. He grew up in Bisbee, Arizona, a rough mining town where shooting wasn't just a hobby, it was a way of life. But Benko wasn't just a hunter. He was a scientist of ballistics. Before the war, he was a competitive shooter of the highest caliber. He didn't just buy bullets, he made them. He hand-loaded his own ammunition, measuring powder grains with the precision of a pharmacist. He understood windage, bullet drop, and velocity in a way that a manual could never teach. In the 1930s, he was winning state championships. He placed in the top tier of national competitions. He knew exactly where a bullet would go the moment it left the barrel. He didn't need a glowing streak of light to tell him he missed. He knew he missed before the round even hit the target. When he joined the Army Air Force after Pearl Harbor, they took one look at his age and tried to make him an instructor. He refused. He wanted to fight. So they put him in the top turret of a B-24 Liberator. This specific plane was nicknamed the Goon. And it was inside this metal glass bubble that Benko made a discovery that would terrify his crew. It happened in the armament tent, the night before a major mission. Benko sat at a wooden table with 500 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition spread out in front of him. Standard procedure was strict: 4 ball rounds, 1 tracer. Repeat. It was military dogma. Benko began to disassemble the belts. One by one, he pulled out the tracers, the rounds with the red tips. He threw them into a discard pile. Then he replaced them with standard armor-piercing ball rounds. The armorer watched him in shock. "What the hell are you doing, Benko?" "I'm taking out the lights," Benko replied. His logic was simple, cold, and undeniable. He argued that tracers were a crutch for bad shooters. They made you lazy. You watched the light instead of using your sights. But worse, the tracer's ballistics were different. As the phosphorus burned off, the bullet got lighter, changing its trajectory at long ranges. So, the tracer wasn't even flying the same path as the real bullets. But his main argument was survival. "Why should I show the Japanese where I am?" he asked. "If I shoot at them without tracers, they won't know who is shooting. They won't see the muzzle flash in the daylight. They'll just see their plane falling apart." The squadron commander was furious. The other gunners were terrified. They thought Benko was arrogant. How could you hit a zero moving at 300 miles per hour without seeing your bullets? "I don't need to see them," Benko said. "I know where they are." He was allowed to fly, but the skepticism hung over the airfield like a fog. Benko was gambling not just with his life, but with the safety of the entire bomber. If he missed, the Goon would be defenseless. He needed to prove them wrong. And on October 31st, 1943, Halloween, the Japanese Imperial Army gave him his chance. The mission was over Haepong. The target was the docks and shipping facilities, but the Japanese were waiting. High above the cloud layer, a swarm of nearly 30 Zeros descended on Benko's formation. They were aggressive, experienced pilots who knew exactly how to dismantle at B-24 formation. They dove. Usually, this is the moment the sky fills with neon spiderwebs. Every American turret opens up, spraying red tracers. The Japanese pilots would see the lines, adjust their dive, and strafe the turrets. But from the top turret of the Goon, there was no light. There was only invisible force. A Zero pilot lined up on Benko's plane. He expected to see the familiar stream of fire so he could dodge it. He saw nothing. He assumed the gunner was asleep or dead, or his guns were jammed. He steadied his plane for the kill run. He never knew what hit him. Benko fired a short, controlled burst. No wasted ammo. The .50 caliber rounds, invisible to the naked eye, tore through the Zero's engine block. The plane didn't smoke. It simply shattered. Then came the second one. A Zero swooping in from the right. Again, the Japanese pilot saw no return fire. He flew straight and steady, confident in his safety. Benko led the target by 3 lengths, calculating speed, angle, and drop in his head in a fraction of a second, and squeezed the trigger. The Zero's wing sheared off at the root. It was chaos for the Japanese. They were being hit by a ghost. They couldn't triangulate the fire. They would dive on a bomber, thinking they were in a blind spot, only to have their cockpit glass implode. Benko was spinning his turret with the precision of a machine. He wasn't spraying and praying. He was sniping with a machine gun. By the time the Zeros retreated, the sky was streaked with smoke, but not from tracers. It was from the burning wreckage of Japanese fighters. When the Goon landed back at base, the intelligence officers rushed to the plane. They had to review the gun camera footage. Benko claimed he had hit a few. The footage told a different story. 1 mission, 7 confirmed kills. It was impossible. It was a number that Fighter Ace's men flying Agile P-38s and P-40s dreamed of getting in a month. Benko had done it in 20 minutes from a defensive turret. The stupid ammo trick wasn't stupid anymore. It was a revolution. Word spread through the 14th Air Force faster than a virus. Benko's loads. Suddenly, every gunner wanted to know the secret. The armory tents were filled with men prying the red-tip bullets out of their belts. The skepticism vanished. The logic was undeniable. Invisible fire meant survival. Japanese intelligence was baffled. Their pilots reported a new American weapon, some sort of radar-guided gun or high-velocity cannon that gave no warning. They began to engage the B-24s more cautiously. The aggression of the Zeros dropped because they couldn't locate the source of the fire until it was too late. Benko's kill count continued to climb. 8, 10, 12. He was racking up numbers that rivaled the top aces of the theater. And he was doing it while sitting in a glass bubble, unable to maneuver, relying entirely on his math and his nerves. General Chenault, the legendary commander of the Flying Tigers, took notice. There was talk of a Medal of Honor. There was talk of sending him home to tour the country, to teach this new method to every gunnery school in America. But Benko didn't want to go home. He had a job to finish. And then came November 14th, 1943, the mission to Hong Kong. The target was the massive dockyards of Hong Kong. It was a max-effort mission. Every flyable B-24 was in the air. Intelligence predicted light resistance. They were wrong. Dead wrong. As the bombers approached the release point, the radar screens lit up. The Japanese had scrambled everything they had. We aren't talking about a patrol. We are talking about 50 to 60 Zeros rising up from the airfields of Kowloon like a swarm of angry wasps. They targeted the lead group. They targeted the Goon. The battle that followed was one of the most intense aerial engagements of the war in China. The Goon was hit almost immediately. Cannon shells ripped through the nose, killing the bombardier instantly. Engines 3 and 4 were set on fire. The hydraulics were shot out. The plane was bleeding oil and fuel. But the top turret was still spinning. Benko was in his element. As the plane shuddered and dropped out of formation, becoming a straggler, the favorite prey of wolves, Benko went to work. Witnesses from other bombers watched in awe. They saw Zeros lining up to finish off the crippled Liberator, only to suddenly explode. Benko was firing in all directions. He cleared the tail. He cleared the beam. He cleared the nose. He shot down one, then another, then a third. In the span of this single hellish dogfight, while his plane was burning around him, Arthur Benko scored 9 confirmed kills. Let that sink in. 9 aircraft destroyed in one sortie. Most gunners didn't get 9 kills in a whole war. But the Goon was finished. The pilot, Captain Skousen, gave the order over the intercom, "Bail out, bail out." The plane was going down over the mountains of China. The territory below was a patchwork of Japanese patrols and Chinese guerrilla fighters. To jump was to roll the dice with death. Benko climbed out of his turret. He had fired every single round of his invisible ammo. He strapped on his chute. He looked at his pilot one last time, and he jumped into the void. Arthur Benko landed in hostile territory. He was alive. He had his .45 pistol and a survival kit. For days, he evaded capture. He moved at night, hiding in rice paddies and bamboo groves. He was trying to reach the safety of the Chinese lines. We know he survived the jump because local villagers reported seeing a tall American. We know he fought until the end. But the Japanese were thorough. They hunted him down. The details of his final hours are lost to history, buried in the chaos of war crimes and burned documents. Some reports say he was captured and executed immediately. Others say he died in a POW camp. What we do know is this: Arthur Benko never came home. When the 14th Air Force tallied the records, the numbers were staggering. In just a few months of combat, Benko had 16 confirmed aerial victories. To put that in perspective, Richard Bong, the top American ace of all time, had 40 kills flying a P-38, Lightning, a fast, maneuverable fighter plane designed to kill. Benko had 16 kills sitting in a slow, heavy bus, firing a defensive machine gun. He was the highest-scoring aerial gunner of the American Air Forces in World War II. Arthur Benko's name should be mentioned in the same breath as Audie Murphy or Alvin York, but it isn't. He is largely forgotten. Why? Because he was just a sergeant. Because he died in a sideshow theater of the war. Because his body was never recovered. But his legacy lived on in every B-29 that flew over Japan and every B-17 that bombed Berlin in the final years of the war. His stupid trick became standard operating procedure. Thousands of gunners survived the war because they stopped painting targets on their own backs. They survived because a miner from Arizona decided to break the rules. Benko proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in war is follow the manual. And sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the one that shines the brightest. It's the one you never see coming. This is the iron legacy of Arthur Benko. If you believe this hero deserves to be remembered, share this video. Let's make sure the name Benko isn't lost to the dark.